These are the plugins that were used in part 1 of our video series, a reverb and a tape delay.
Hello and welcome back to the Music Rig. My name is Ernesto McKenzie, and on today's video, this is part 2 of our video series. We'll be talking about some settings I used in the previous video. And of course, this is all about using reverb to create depth. We'll be talking about the settings that were used on the effects for the previous video. I gave you guys various examples on how we can use a duplicate lead vocal track to trigger reverb on different words and phrases that we wanted to emphasize, just adding a little bit more effect, more depth, more umph.
So the reverb that we've been using is the Reverb Pro from UAD. I really like this reverb because it gives you a lot of options. You can really move parameters around and choose different settings. In this case, I'm using the Eternity preset. It's a very long reverb, and it's what I would consider to be a dark reverb. So it has a very long decay time. I had to make some adjustments to this preset. One of the things I did is adjust the timing. I dialed it back from 36.6 seconds, which is a very long decay, and set it to something more like 9.6 seconds, which is still long, but nowhere close to 36.6. On this plugin, the controls allow you to adjust the thickness of the materials for the room that's being modeled. So the thickness of the materials was the other setting that I adjusted. I moved the fader to the left to adjust the amount. These faders can be used to increase or decrease the amount of decay. If you shift it to the left, it makes the decay rate shorter. If you shift it to the right, it makes the decay rate longer. I have this control set to 80%. All right, for the secret sauce, we have a tape delay, and this is the stock Logic Pro tape delay that's already included in Logic Pro. So let's do a quick recap. In our first plugin slot, we have the reverb from UAD. You can use any reverb, but in this case, we're using the Reverb Pro by Universal Audio. Following that, the tape delay plugin by Logic Pro will be in the second slot. These are the settings that I use for the tape delay plugin. The delay is set to 800 milliseconds. The sync button is activated, so what this does, it goes ahead and locks in the BPM of your session, and that way you don't really have to do much. But sometimes it is kind of cool to manually dial in those settings. However, when you hit sync, it just kind of does it for you. Now, the groove is set to 50%. In the newer version of Logic Pro, that might be what's considered I believe the deviation. So there's like a percentage that you can kind of sway the timing of that delay. So I believe groove on the old version and deviation, which show up on the latest version of Logic Pro, are the same thing. Feedback is set to 30%, and then on the output side of things, we have 70% dry and 30% wet. I haven't engaged any low cut or any high cut. Everything is just kind of set to its standard setting. Let's see, for smooth, it's set at 40 milliseconds, so pretty much nothing was changed there. The tape delay in Logic Pro does have some settings which may allow you to mimic the tonality and the character of a tape machine. Tape machines usually impart some type of vibe. For this example, we've left everything in its default state, so we're not adding any extra wow or flutter. In the latest version of Logic Pro, it says character. So you can adjust the clip threshold, the spread, even change the different type of tape head modes. Again, I left all the settings for character at 0. I believe that's the default, so no changes there. For the tape head, I believe the default is clean, and that's where I left it. These sections that are highlighted are from the duplicate lead vocal track. This send right here is feeding our Vox effects bus. So we're going from here to here. All right, for our first step, we have an EQ on the first slot. It's the stock EQ from Logic Pro. The highs and the lows are rolled off. This is a pro move that has been used on countless records. Rolling off the highs and lows on the duplicate lead vocal track allows us to keep out any clutter and any unwanted frequencies from going into our Vox effects bus. In this example, most of the frequencies that you'll see are in the mid-range. That's when I'm feeding the effects bus. Every situation may require you to make a different move. For this song, I engaged the low-pass filter. It's set at 3.2K. Some EQs may list the low-pass filter as a high cut. They do exactly the same thing. Our slope is set at a 12 dB roll-off. This is allowing us to remove all of that top end that we don't want to feed to our Vox effects bus in this example. Next, we're going to engage the high-pass filter. which is allowing us to filter out low-end frequency. So I have this set at 235 hertz, and it is a pretty steep slope, so it's set at 24 dB per octave, which means that it's pretty aggressive and will roll off a lot of the low end we don't need.
Come away. Come away.
Every song will be different, so you need to experiment with which frequency points you may want to roll off for your particular song. But I chose 3.2K and 235 hertz. Now for step 2, it's optional, but in some cases, adding a compressor plugin immediately after our EQ allows us to add more character and sustain to our Vox effects bus. As you can see here, I've added into the second slot the UAD Shadow Hills compressor. It's adding a tiny bit of character and again, sustain to the words that we want to highlight. You don't have to use the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. I prefer compressors that add a little bit of tonal character. So some might be a little bit more aggressive, some might be smooth. In this case, the Shadow Hills has an optical compressor and also a discrete compressor that's built in. So there's 2 channels of that you can use. But even the stock compressor that comes with Logic or your DAW can be used to do this very same task. All right, so for the settings on the Shadow Hills compressor, it appears that on the discrete compressor, I have a 3:1 ratio with a medium attack, and the release seems to be set to fast. The threshold is set to 8, but of course, that's going to vary based on the song, and also the type of compressor that you're using may require you to use different settings. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to copy these settings, but this is just a starting point. In part 1 of the video series, I mentioned that you should select the pre-fader for your Vox Bus Send. Now this is what happens when you select pre-fader. This is giving you control over how much level or gain you are feeding the Vox effects bus. And so you can put as little or as much in there, and it's independent of this fader that you see here. I have my fader set to 0 on this duplicate vocal track that we've labeled Vox Effects because I'm only feeding the Vox Effects bus. Remember, the goal here is just to add reverb. We're not looking to make this vocal sound any louder. I just need the reverb to support this vocal. All right, so we're going to bypass the effects here on this duplicate lead Vox that we've labeled Vox Effects.
Come away. Come away with me. Come away. Come away with me.
If you pay close attention, you can hear that the overall level of the vocal seems to increase when the EQ and the compressor are in bypass. In a different situation, this might be a desired effect. In this case, I'm not looking to bring up the overall level of our vocal. I just want the effect to sit around that lead vocal to support it. The bottom line is that the duplicate lead vocal track allows me to manipulate effects and have more control. Like it's just a completely separate control. Once again, I'd like to thank artist Amarachi Ude for allowing us to use her song in our demonstration for this video. Feel free to check her music out. I'll provide links below.
Like I've said before, there are so many ways that you can apply effects to your vocals. Now, with this particular tip, I think it comes in handy because it allows you to have more control over different things that you may want to do to your lead vocal. Sometimes using a duplicate vocal track to kind of trigger additional effects just makes it a little bit easier for you to decide how much of it you want. So again, there's so many ways of doing it. This is just one additional way that you can add to your toolkit. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. On part 3, I plan on showing you guys how I accomplish the same results, but just using a slightly different method. All right? So I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, stay safe.